Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Certified Forgotten. It is, much to the surprise of you, an uncertified episode this week. We had a wonderful guest planned. They unfortunately were not able to make it. They're going to catch us in the upcoming, in a week or two. I think we're going to be able to get them on. So we're super excited about that. We'll let you know when that happens. But in lieu of trying to crash the boards and come up with something, we thought maybe we would record an episode that you have been waiting a long time to hear. If you've ever listened to Matt Donato and I argue online, you know this is a topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts. Quick reminder, Certified Forgotten is a podcast that talks about films with 10 or fewer reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. Our tagline is some films are certified fresh, some films are certified rotten, our films are certified forgotten. And every other week, we record an episode of Uncertified, which talks about a new release and kind of goes through the rigmarole of understanding if it is a Monagle movie, which means slow burn and spooky, or if it's a Donato movie, which means it's completely over the top in all of the best ways. And that very topic, that very disconnect between our two flavors of horror, Donato, is why we have never really been able to agree on one director in particular, Mr. Osgood Perkins.
Yeah, this goes back to like the very beginning of the podcast, before the podcast. This is one of I think this might actually be where we came up with Donato versus Monagle movies.
Mm-hmm.
Perkins has just not been in my blood since the very beginning. And I know that is controversial to say because out the gate was February, or The Black Coat's Daughter, you may know it more as. And I've given The Black Coat's Daughter many tries, and it is not the masterpiece I think everyone else says it is, but to everyone their opinion, because I will admit that Osgood Perkins is a filmmaker who I always show up for, because as much as his wavelength has been hard for me to ride, let's say, I understand that he is one of the most individual filmmakers in the horror sphere at this moment. I mean, if you're watching an Oz Perkins movie, you know exactly what you're getting from him to a degree. His trademarks are very easily pointed out. Very slow burn, very style over substance, we'll say. And it just hasn't been for me yet.
Yeah.
And that is where like all this stems from, all the Monagle Donato stuff, all the Black Coat Starter trash talk on online. And like, let's be honest, we were going to talk about this next week anyway, so all we did is push this up a single week. We were always going to have our Longlegs conversation, and as Monagle said, you know, sometimes scheduling just doesn't work out, so we're going to take a quick break from the main show, and you're going to get 2 more Uncertifieds out of us. But this is an interesting one because it is our personality so blatantly. Like, we're just putting it out there, like who we are as horror fans, and I think that's really what this conversation comes down to.
So if you're listening to this podcast and you don't know that Black Coat's Daughter is my favorite movie, then you're not part of our core audience, and we're grateful that you're here. But that's true. Black Coat's Daughter is my favorite horror film. I'm currently contemplating a Black Coat's Daughter tattoo. I think I've decided that's going to be my next tattoo. It speaks to everything I like in horror, which is I've always described my taste in horror as waiting 80 minutes of a 90-minute movie for the bad thing to happen, and then the bad thing happens. I basically like horror that is anxiety through like a horror lens. I love it. It's my favorite thing. You've heard me talk about Sana and Hagazusa and a bunch of other stuff on here. And Osgood Perkins is a really interesting director. I'm comfortable calling him my favorite director because when he's on, there is nobody making movies that speaks to the things that I love about horror in quite the same way. But it's not like he has this enormous body of work, right? Prior to Longlegs, the film we're going to talk about today, prior to Longlegs, he directed 3 movies. He directed The Black Coat's Daughter. He directed I Am the Pretty Thing That Lived, Pretty Young Thing, Pretty Thing That Lives in the House, which is too opaque by half even for me. And he directed Gretel and Hansel, which I think is extremely stylish, but is missing a few pieces that kind of brings it into that top gear. So I don't love there are directors where every movie that they've made, I really, really, really like. Osgood Perkins is not a director where every single movie he's made, I've been like, this is great. This is my top 10 list of the year. But when he's on, when he and I are on the same wavelength, I am vibing with his stuff harder than any other filmmaker working in the genre or outside of the genre today. And that's, I think, I mean, you know what you have those directors too, Donata. There's just something special about finding that director that you're like, whatever wavelength you're on, I'm on too.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I'm not even anti slow burn either. I want to put that out there. I know when I talk about something like Saint Maud, for example, I am in the other side of the conversation of people who are not obsessed with a movie that goes, what, 80, 85 minutes for a 2-second flash payoff. That's not my favorite type of filmmaking.
Right.
But I think Saint Maud, there is more to gaze at throughout that film, and there is more to be enamored with. Where my struggles to this point with Perkins, and I have not liked a single Oz Perkins movie before Longlegs. I don't know if that spoils the conversation for later, but it, I Am the Pretty Thing is one of the most anemic, boring films I have ever watched in my life. It is a fucking daydream with shackles on, and it's like dragging its feet the entire time. I loathe that movie. The Black Hood's Daughter, I don't like. It's a higher form of stronger performances. I do like the satanic vibes going through it at times, but the film meanders. I'm going to use a lot of the same kind of adjectives here to describe Perkins. And then Gretel and Hansel was the closest I ever came to writing a positive review before Longlegs. And I do agree with you. It's super stylish. I love Oz Perkins's view of a grim fairy tale because what he delivers through the visuals of the tables full of food and the witch and everything there, like his style of filmmaking is tremendous when it comes to visual appeal.
Man
And
loves
again,
triangles. He loves triangles.
yes, he loves triangles. He loves these geometric shapes. He loves going into these like grand. I don't want to say spectacle because that feels a little too strong. But in Gretel and Hansel, when you are in that kind of Mother Goose territory, he does lean into the fable like grandiosity of it all. Like there is some spectacle elements to the way like the trees are kind of torn into each other, and there's so much angular stuff going on. It looks just unsettling. So I've always been there with his visual appeal. I've just felt that his movies linger in a way that I have been waiting for him to get to my speed on because the way the camera moves is so slow. The way everything moves is so slow. He tells his story in ways that is intricate and methodical, but the way he takes his time is just so divisive. And especially like I that is why I hate I Am the Pretty Thing. There is so much of that movie that is just wandering through the house and following a ghost, and the narration, everything about it, it fucking lingers. And that can be such a tool when used sparingly, but when it's all you have for long stretches, that's where you kind of lose me. So like all that to say, like how we got to this point, I guess, is
Yeah.
I have struggled so mightily with him, but like that's why I think that is why my biggest point I have made when tweeting about Longlegs and writing my review is not from a place of ego. Like I don't think my take is unique enough to like put me on the highest level of criticism, but
Well,
for
hey,
anyone that
don't sell yourself short. People are watching Oddity because of you. People near and dear to you are
Jesus.
watching Oddity because of you.
Jesus, that is true. That is true. But getting back to Longlegs, like I am pointing out, hey, I am someone who has not liked Oz Perkins to this point, and I
Mhm.
think Longlegs fucking rips. And it is helpful that people respond to my tweets and my review and stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, like this is actually what I needed to hear. Like I have been nervous because this is an Oz Perkins movie and I love everything about it, but I haven't vibed yet. So like I think there's something about knowing yourself as a horror fan. There's something about knowing the critics that you read and kind of following them down those paths because like me and you is the perfect example. We are so separate on Oz Perkins, but eventually we were going to get there. Like eventually this is going to happen.
Yeah. And the same thing can any director sort of we'll call it the A24 special, right? Like they work with a stable of horror filmmakers now, the Ari Asters of the world. And there's a lot of I like about those movies, but there's not, I mean, I love Midsummer a decent amount. I do not like Hereditary. I'm the rare Hereditary hater, but there's definitely a sensation you get when you can tell that there is something about a director's ethos, their vision, their whatever you want to call it, and you just feel out of step with them. It's the counter to what I said about feeling in step with Oz Perkins. You also know when you watch a director and you're like, I see what you're doing, I like what you're doing, but there's just something missing for me. There is something about the way you go about your business that does not work for me. And so no matter how I feel about your movies, there's sort of like a ceiling, a cap to what I'm going to be able to get out of them, because you are just operating at a frequency that I can't connect with. And I think that it's part of the reason why it's funny that in a lot of ways I do think the Black Coat Starter is the reason that Certified Forgotten exists, because it is the platonic ideal of a director that I vibe with and a director that you don't vibe with. Like somebody who on paper you're like, I get it, I understand it, but I don't like it. And for me, being like, when you're talking about things that you have problems with, I'm like, I get it, I understand it. Yes, I Am the Pretty Thing is slow, but it's still pretty and I vibe with it, even though it's, even for me, too opaque. So do we want to talk about Longlegs?
Well, I mean, I was just going to give another example of
Oh
saying
yeah, hit me.
I completely understand where like I am a Benson and Moorhead super fan in a way, and I don't think they have misstepped yet.
Yeah,
I think there are varying degrees to their success. I think they have highs and lows, but their
sure.
lows to me are still better than most. And I totally understand why someone could really not jive with The Endless, for example. Like The
Sure.
Endless is exactly the kind of movie I was describing. It is a slow burn. It is just a walk through a cult and trying to figure out how these men can come to terms with themselves, having left the cult and coming back, and everything about that. It is a character study. It is not, let's say, adrenaline filled. But at the end of the day, the way that Benson and Moorhead like deal with the existential dread of the film and really address like those fears that we all have in life, that is what I connect to so deeply. So like the stuff that you're connecting to with Perkins and the way that you're finding the beauty in his visuals, and like you can go along for that kind of fantasy with him. Like Benson Moorhead is my version of that. The
Yeah.
way that they tell their stories is 99% of the time going to hit me right in the gut and like take me along so simply. So like I understand where you're coming from with that. And I mean, going back to one of the first episodes of the podcast was Ashley Blackwell with Sauna, and Sauna was like your pick. It was before we let the guest pick, and you came to me, you're like, hey, this is top tier monocle movie. Like this is one of those period dready slow burn films, and I found a lot to love in that movie. So again, it's not. It is sad to say that it's such a specific Perkins thing with me, but that
Hmm.
is why I celebrated Longlegs so hard. Like I'm not. I don't go into this thing going, oh, I hate Oz Perkins. I haven't liked this movie. Like I'm gonna hate this one too. Like no, I film critics fucking love movies. I mean, like I
Yeah.
like liking movies. That is what we do. So I have been going into every Oz movie going, this is gonna be the one, and it never is until Longlegs. And like I celebrated that shit so hard. I was like, holy shit, I found one.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Longlegs. If you are listening and you haven't seen the film yet, you probably should go do that. It is deeply spoiled on social media in a way that is like kind of embarrassing for everyone involved. So,
TikTok is fucking broken everything.
awful. It's awful. It's like clips, whatever. That's besides the point. Go see it. Let us know what you think. But quick plot synopsis if you're still following along. Whether you call it precognition or just intuition, Agent Lee Harker has a gift. So when the FBI runs out of leads for a series of murders only linked by coded letters signed by someone named Longlegs, they take the risk on the junior agent. But as Harker inches closer to the true identity of Longlegs, she threatens to reveal a personal connection that could put everything she worked for at risk. Directed by Osgood Perkins, Longlegs is David Fincher by way of The Devil and the unquestioned horror movie of the summer. So, Longlegs. We really liked it. Let's not boil the lead. Both of us were really super into it, and I had a lot more to lose than you did, and I was very relieved that I connected with the movie.
Yeah, I'm so like I don't really know where to start with this because did I like it more than you? I'm just generally
I think
curious thinking
so.
out loud. I think I did like it a little more than you. So I think that speaks to the application of procedural horror that Oz Perkins uses here, and the way that this definitely leans way more into. Like I made comparisons to The Devil's Candy. I made comparisons to these
Mm,
movies that are very much on the surface a normal scenario. Sounds very weird, but we're talking about a FBI agent just on a case. But like the satanic element and the sinister elements are hidden for a little bit, but the way they leak out is so effective. So again, I kind of talked about Pyewacket. I kind of talked about The Devil's Candy in my review. There's this Belgian movie called The Treatment that I think is really in line with what's going on here. If you liked Longlegs, it deals with a inspector who's haunted by the abduction of his brother, and years later thinks he has the killer, blah blah blah. There's a lot of parallels there, and what I really dug out of Longlegs the most is the performances. Number one are just spot on. You have an A+
Yep.
cast just doing what the fuck they do. Like, it's hard up and down, like from Blair Underwood to Micah Monroe, Alicia Witt, Nicolas Cage. They're all doing great shit.
There
um
is no actor for my money in Hollywood making better decisions right now than Micah Monroe. Like, it just isn't. Everything she does is interesting and challenging in a way that, like, when I was upset when she did the Independence Day sequel, because I thought that that would either be a success and ruin her career in one direction, or when it flopped, ruin her career in the other direction. But Significant Other, Villains, which is a movie that I deeply, deeply love, Watcher, which is perfect, a 5-star movie for me. There it is. Long before this was anything, just when it was announced as a casting decision, Osgood Perkins and Micah Monroe felt like a special, special combination, especially given how well he directs women. He has female lead characters in all of his movies, and it felt like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's worth pausing on Micah Monroe and saying the internet is having its moment with her right now. It's super fucking well deserved.
Yeah, Villains is the one I'm surprised most on. I thought that, at least in horror circles, had made its rounds. I saw that at South by, I think. I fucking love that movie. It's Micah and Bill Skarsgård playing
It's great.
these Bonnie and Clyde-ish kind of bumbling criminals who
I
face
own
off.
like 6 DVDs, and it's one of it. That is
Yeah,
that is the
100%.
highest praise I
The
can do. Yeah,
the Vinegar Syndrome release I have.
yeah, it's
Absolutely. It's
great.
beautiful. It's almost as sexy as Tyler's Tragedy Girls. That is the best artwork I've seen on a Blu-ray. Anyway, getting sidetracked. Yeah, but like, like I was saying, aside from the performances that we get, I think Oz Perkins is doing a really good Sean Byrne impersonation. Again, going back to The Devil's Candy, but also holy shit, the Prom Night one that I'm now blanking on the fucking title on. Anyway, you probably know Sean Byrne.
Darling.
No. I
Okay,
don't know why I'm blanking on the goddamn name. It's gonna kill me later.
it's fine.
Doesn't matter. But he's hitting the approachable mainstream horror thriller vibe where it is infernal. It is evil. Like, there are doll makers. There are tremendous visuals throughout this thing. There's a creeping sense of dread where the cinematography is positioned like you are voyeuristically watching Micah Monroe's character at points. The way that he makes us participate in what's going on through the lens of the camera is very well done. But at the same time, it is more accessible to the mainstream.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I am able to appreciate this more, because all those things that Oz Perkins is known for, all those signatures we were talking about before, they exist, but they are tempered. There is absolutely a sense here where he is going for a more traditional horror vibe,
Yep.
or even just, let's say, like traditional filmmaking vibe, where the way he lingers in I'm the Pretty Thing that turns me off so bad, and he just goes on for a long stretch. You get cuts here. He'll linger for a little bit on this gorgeous shot that makes you feel so uncomfortable, and then boom, you get a spike of adrenaline somewhere. He knows how to intercut the energy that, like, a normal audience will need, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
someone who's not dedicated to these like art house lingery films, and the way that he works that into Longlegs. I think he's found such a what I appreciate in the balance. Let's say, I was gonna say, like, he's found a balance that works for everyone, but obviously, if you love his older stuff more, like, I understand why it might not be the balance you're looking for. But for me, he's found a balance that I appreciate, where he's not losing his sensibility as a director. You still know this is an Oz Perkins movie, but he's welcoming a larger audience into his world, and I think
Right.
that is so important.
Yeah, an Osgood Perkins studio movie, which is basically just a neon movie, right? When you combine those two things, you end up with a neon release rather than like a Warner Brothers, or something a bit more mainstream. Yeah, I really like this film. It's I think definitely going to end up at the top, near the, or somewhere on my top list. Certainly my top list of horror movies of the year. Um, and I was never out on it, but I think one of the things that's important if you sit down to watch it for the first time, one of the things that you need to sort of have in mind is the procedural elements and what the point of them is. Because I did spend probably the first act of the movie trying to understand how important the procedural elements were, and if this was a movie that had a logic that I needed to lock into, right? Because like a lot of procedural thrillers are basically about like, here's the scenario, we're going to give you clues, and everything is going to adhere to sort of like an internal logic that we have where we're like, we're going to pay these things off in ways. I did not know there was a lot of stuff happening in the first part of the movie that was just a little out there. You learn very early on that the Lee Harker character is a little bit gifted, is a little bit touched. The reasons for that we won't get into, but you know that she can see the future a little bit. There's an element of the supernatural that is then sort of subverted for most of the movie into just she's sort of a we'll say like a Fox Mulder type character, right? A little spooky, kind of a cop, but not too much more than that. And so the film is sort of it's doing this stuff where it's like introducing procedural elements but also taking some swings that like there's no way the FBI would let this person get as deep into the case as she could be because she's like barely hanging on by a single thread, which is a performance choice that I know from conversations have turned a few people off. It works for me. We can talk about that if we need to. But the thing that you need to know going into the movie, if you haven't seen it for the first time, is ultimately all of that procedural shit is just vibes. There isn't really that much of a logic to the first half of the movie. You don't need to, it doesn't need to make perfect sense because the direction they take it in, especially in the final 20 minutes or so of the movie, says that a lot of this is sort of like the on par with time travel logic, and where you don't need to close every loop. Not everything about the investigation needs to make sense. It just needs to feel good so that when you have these big emotional moments later on, you're like, yeah, all that early stuff held together enough for that to work. And that seems like it's a small thing, but it's one of those like I found myself for a big part of the movie being like, am I following traditional thriller or like crime novel rules here? Do I need to remember this stuff and make those connections so that when the payoff happens, I can put all these pieces back together in my head retroactively? That's not really the kind of movie it is. And so if you go in saying you don't need to figure out the mystery, you need to let the mystery wash over you and let them get to the place where they want to go, I think you'll have a better time. And I think that that's something that I know a few folks that I've talked to have struggled with, which is just sort of like they're like, oh, is it a true crime thrill? It's like sort of, but not really. Just enjoy the scenery and the performances and the ideas and the dialogue. Enjoy every fucking thing that Blair Underwood is doing the entire movie long, and don't treat it like it is you know a seven where you need to understand the modus operandi, the pattern of the kills, and how all these things connected. It'll get paid off eventually. It just won't get paid off in this like detail by detail manner that you need to like have really been locked into the whole time.
Yeah, you have to suspend some belief there, and I think that is when Longlegs does struggle a little bit. Not even going farther than what you said, but there are absolutely a few plot lines that, you know, would an investigation actually act this way? Could you actually get
Yeah.
away with what's happening? What you just said about, the abilities that Lee Harker may or may not have, very much something that I think falls off towards the end. But that's also the kind of vibe that I think Osgood Perkins is trying to create. It's what you just explained. You're along for the ride, and you can kind of clue into a scene and just be there versus the entire collection, let's say. And again, while I do take that in consideration as a critic, and I do think that's where I found my problems with Longlegs, the ability to never lose that vibe, the momentum of the film
Yeah.
keeps going. It is a brisk hour 40. Like, we're talking about one of those pretty solidly strung along movies. And the way that Osgood, man, like the way that again he nudges the film deeper and deeper off the high end, let's say, like it's on the edge
Yep.
of the diving board and he's just there pushing and pushing, and then like once like the film goes over that ledge and starts falling and really going into madness, it finds another gear. And that's the other thing I've always struggled in a Perkins movie, going along with that lingering. I never feel like there's that final act push into like another gear. I know you're looking at me, I know you're giving it to me,
You
but
don't think the Black Goat's Daughter has a third act push?
I think there is a push. It doesn't affect me in the same way that it affects other people.
Okay.
I think Longlegs is the first time once again he really engages that second gear and he really finds how to drive a movie home. And again, Blair Underwood can't stress this enough. Everyone is obviously talking about Micah and Nicolas Cage, which
Yep.
we are happy to talk about in a second. But I do want to shout out again, like Alicia Witt and Blair Underwood both, because they have pivotal roles in keeping you in this film. Like I can't get into too much about both of them because what they're doing is very transformative as the film goes on. But the way that they are able to display a range of personalities in these characters, and whether that's Underwood's superior agent, he's the veteran of the two between him and Micah Monroe's Harker, and Underwood does such a good job calming you. Like he does such a good job of sitting you down in the bar and having a glass of whiskey and being like, you're working too hard. You're doing this, you're doing that. Like he's playing a
Yeah.
stereotype in a way, but he's just, I love when he just looks at it. He's like, you're coming in to meet my wife and my kid. And like Micah Monroe tenses up and it's just so awkward. And the way that Underwood just like keeps pushing her in those areas is fantastic. I think this is a movie you can also laugh at. There are some
Yep.
really good comedic beats. One of which is when Blair Underwood, the character he's playing, his daughter is sitting in bed with Micah Monroe, and we finally get Micah's agent Lee Harker to look a little human. And the kid just looks at her like, "You want to come to my birthday party?" And the fear and paranoia that washes over her face as she basically sighs and is like, "Ah." And I get it. You don't want to go to a kid's birthday party. Like it's such a funny little moment, but even those little moments are done really right.
Right.
And we need that because that is a breath of fresh air. Because not long after, we're going to get hit with the image of a corpse like in our face that is stuffed with maggots and completely rotten. And the way the movie swings from kind of letting you take a breath, but then just wiping you out in the next few minutes, it's good. It's good at that.
Yeah, the moment in the movie, in a movie full of great moments, the moment in the movie that my wife was sitting next to me in the theater that got her to like reach out and like grab my arm and shake me was when Blair Underwood is like, "Are you a baseball fan? Because I need somebody to talk about my beloved Mariners with." And I was like, "All right, now this is just embarrassing. This is
Literally, I like watching that moment. I'm just like, how is this not the most monocle movie? It's an Oz Perkins movie talking about the fucking Mariners.
it's a Oz Perkins movie about basically like religious horror film starring Micah Monroe and Nick Cage, where one of the characters is a huge Seattle Mariners fan. Like it's stupidly catered to me, and I love it for that. But I agree with you. I love what you said because as much as this movie is this game between Longlegs and Harker, between Micah Monroe and Nick Cage, the stakes of the film, the stakes of the film belong to Alicia Witt and belong to Blair Underwood. What happens to those two characters over the course of the movie is the balance of the movie. That is the good versus evil, like winning versus losing, is what happens to those characters. And without, I'm not going to give anything else away, but like both of them are the emotional stakes of the film in a way that Nick Cage and Micah Monroe are not. And so I think it's super important to talk about them because in a lot of ways they're the ones that are sort of stealing the show in terms of the characters that move the most over the course of the movie, that have the most to lose, that have the biggest triumphs or tragedies in their arcs outside of what Nick Cage and Micah Monroe are doing, which I also love. I love that you have this like extremely talented actress and this iconic actor, and the movie is about the two characters in the middle that aren't them. I think that's beautiful, and I think it's set up so well.
And you don't have Cage going what I like to refer to as meme Cage. I mean, this is a movie that understands how to use Nicolas Cage in a way.
I disagree, but
Oh, you think
continue your thought. I disagree, but I have a perspective. I want to hear yours first.
that is fine. When I talk about meme Cage, the one that we all know online, the one that has been
Mm-hmm.
gifted a million times, I think more times than not, a filmmaker will see that kind of appreciation is a hard way to describe that, but fandom and the people who just want to see him go silly and misunderstand why he's good at what he does and why those moments can work in a movie like Mom and Dad, for example. His rendition of the hokey pokey while destroying a billiards
Mom,
table, well,
Dad.
just
Yeah.
fucking like that is how you use him in a ridiculous scene, but also you don't lose him to that the rest of the movie. I think Willy's or Wally's Wonderland, I always get that shit wrong, and I'm going to keep doing it.
Yep.
That is a movie that doesn't understand how to use Cage, and I understand he chose not to use his voice there, but they were going so hard to have the badass meme of Nick Cage that doesn't work. Where like this is a fucking brilliant actor. We're not talking just about Pig. Like, he literally
Right.
is a award-winning actor. We know he can act. So when you get Longlegs and you get a character where he is he is losing himself to the satanic elements of the film. He is losing himself to the influences that he brings in, whether that's a image, like, he this is from an interview. He said an image of his mom in his head where she looked at him and she had this like makeup cream all over her face.
Yep.
That is what that was. But also I love how he's drawing from like 70s and 80s arena rock kind of level frontmen.
Oh,
And
yeah,
like,
he's pure glam rock. Longlegs is
right,
pure glam rock.
he's
Yeah.
pure glam rock. The way I described him in my review was like the bloated corpse of David Lee Roth, and like that shit
Hmm.
is 100%. When he starts singing in the car and he starts belting lyrics out like he is singing on stage, I think that is the level of crazy Cage that we understand and we appreciate. But it's like in Mandy, where he is a duality, where he's not doing that the whole time. He is not a cartoon character. He is a deeply unhinged killer in this movie. And the way that he can translate not only the embellishments and the quote unquote crazy Cage moments, but then just him talking, then just him using his hands in really discomforting ways, and the hiding of his whole face for so much of the movie is brilliant.
Yep.
Your mind does more work than Cage's performance half the time, but he is still doing so goddamn much as Longlegs. And I never think we get full meme Cage, because that would mean we are laughing at him. And I was never laughing at Nicolas Cage in this movie. I was deeply, deeply uncomfortable, especially when he's just talking to children. It is
Yep.
that is pure fucking serial killer stuff. That is America's Most Wanted shit. That is Snowtown Murders, everything at that level. Like, fuck, like, it is just, he is so good at dialing in, finding that character, and being exactly who he needs to be in every scene.
Then I think we actually agree more than we disagree on that front. I reviewed this for Certified Forgotten. It was the first review we've ever published. It's something we're going to start playing with a little bit more. Both Donato and I are Rotten Tomato certified critics, so we can get the site up there. And we thought, if we want to review stuff and we don't have an outlet lined up, it's a great place for us to publish some original horror criticism. And the thing that I wrote in there is that I think that Cage actually goes to his normal heights. I think that this is Cage dialed up to 11, but I think the partnership between Cage and Osgood Perkins is perfect, because to the point that you made, Perkins doesn't show Cage goes full Cage. Perkins doesn't show full Cage. We see Longlegs in fragments. A lot of the movie we see him just from the chin down, right? For a lot of the shots, especially a lot of the flashback sequences. There are big sections of the movie where we only see Longlegs in profile. He is a nose peeking out from a full head of hair, or he is somebody standing and facing away from the camera that we don't see, his face or his reactions. Cage's facial expressions are in this movie for, I mean, they're not super scarce, but I would say that like we see his face probably for under 10 minutes of the whole thing, certainly under 10 minutes of the whole thing. And I think that is a perfect balance, right? Because there are directors that benefit from working with somebody like Nick Cage, where they can align with him and they can go to those places with him. And I feel like Osgood Perkins is one of the first times I've seen a director that says, "You do your thing, and I'm not going to leave you hung out to dry. Like, I am going to create a character. You can create a character that is whatever you want this character to be." Longlegs could 100% have run out ahead of the rest of the film, tonally. Like, the character of Longlegs could 1,000,000% have been a departure, a deviation, or a distraction from the careful tone that exists throughout the rest of the movie. But it's the best of both worlds, because Cage gets to do his thing, and Perkins understands how to show the character of Longlegs in fragments, in profile, in sections, through sound and only voiceover, in a way that allows both actor and director to get the most from that character. And that's there it takes talent. It takes talent to go there as Cage, and it takes talent to find the way to cast him in the best possible light as Perkins, especially for a movie that is so, again, for lack of a better word, Fincher-esque, and is just like a tone poem for so much of it. To be able to have that performance in that movie and have it all feel of a piece is nothing short of a small miracle, I think.
Yeah, and he's surrounded with, once again, we're talking about Micah Monroe, who is playing wounded, confident, everything you'd expect from the rookie FBI, trying to make a name for herself and pursuing a case that has personal ties, and she is very like involved in. There are so many layers to her performance as well, where she has to be, she's so afraid at some points, but she can't show it because she's on the job, and like she has to
Yeah.
fight with herself and keep that steely demeanor. Like what she is doing there is fantastic work. And then you get the few moments where they share scenes, let's say, and we won't really get into it, like we're getting closer to spoiler territory, so that like that's all fine. But what we are getting performatively is on such a high caliber, and then you add in all the stuff Perkins is doing, whether that's the aspect ratio changing, whether it's a flashback or
Hmm.
reality. He's being really thoughtful about the visual storytelling and the composition of everything. The just the image of snakes that is dyed red with a red filter, and just in case you forgot, this is a really evil fucking movie. He just throws these little intercut moments to make you remember, and he never loses that thread of how despicable the things that are happening is. Whether that is a gunshot to the back of the head, whether that is the corpses, whether that's crime scene photos, you are in this constant state of unease, and he doesn't let you out of it, even though this is a film that sometimes does take the pedal off the straightforward horror approach. This is just
Yeah.
an investigation at points, and whether that is a fantastical investigation with Micah Monroe's powers or whatever you want to call that, or we get the scenes of Cage making dolls, which again is just something you'll have to find out about. That shit just keeps you in a constant state of anxiousness, and it again helps the pace. It helps this thing flow so easily because you are just locked in on the screen. You're like,
Yeah.
shit, what the fuck is happening next? Like there's no ability to breathe. And I have felt that so infrequently with an Oz Perkins movie that I just over the moon, over the goddamn moon.
And I do want to shout out. It's a small performance, but oh, it's good. My girl Kiernan Shipka shows up, the star of Blackcoat's Daughter. For those keeping track at home, she's in the movie for a little bit, and she's the meme. She has become the meme of the movie, and all the things that are memeable about this movie. Kiernan Shipka's performance is the thing that I think people latch onto the most, and it's totally deserving. And I love it. I love it when a director goes back and works with people they've worked with before. It's like my favorite fucking thing in the world. So very, very cool to see her in the film as well. It's tough for me to say that there's a heck of a lot more we could talk about this movie without getting into some of the stuff that we just really don't want to spoil for you. Where this movie goes in the final 30 minutes is a delight. And that's what made the movie for me. I talk a little bit about not quite knowing how seriously to take the movie. I think I ended up doing the old Donald Trump quote, which is like, don't take it literally, but take it seriously. That's how you take the procedural elements of the movie. And everything that happens in the last 30 minutes of this movie makes everything else work beautifully. As a matter of fact, I can almost guarantee you that when I go see this again, and I will go see this again this weekend, it's going to really jump for me in terms of my appreciation for it, because I'm going to vibe with it. I'm going to be able to understand the tone piece from the jump, and I'm going to be on that wavelength a lot more throughout the whole thing. So it's a damn good horror movie, and I'm heartened by the fact that we're creating kind of like a little bit of moment out of it, that people are really that I see people like on TikTok creating dance videos to Longlegs songs. Like it feels like the song. I said that this is the unquestioned horror movie of the summer. It feels like the song of the summer level for horror. It's just like people are connecting to it. People are liking it. The discourse has been, from what I've seen on Twitter, pretty awful. But just generally in terms of quality, like people seem to be having good conversations about even those that don't like it, the stuff that works for them. And it's been a while, I think, since we had fun with a horror movie the way that we're having fun with this one.
It's been
um
Megan. I mean, like honestly, we did probably have to go back to
yeah,
Megan to
yeah, I
really,
agree.
if we're talking about like TikTok dances and things of that nature. And we have to give credit to Neon's marketing campaign
The
for
best.
Longlegs. Woof. I mean, they're being rewarded financially. Like this is one of their most profitable for I think horror at least. And my God, it deserves it. And that campaign is what laid the groundwork. It sold the movie perfectly. Like
Yep.
it really did sell everything this movie is. And how often do we complain about marketing that hides maybe the real tone of a movie or tries to missell the audience. And it's just there to get butts in seats. We know what marketing is. Marketing is meant to make us buy tickets, but
Yep.
what Neon did was very, very respectful and very smart. Like, this was super clever marketing. They knew exactly how to get the right attention on Longlegs, and they did that. It's tremendous.
That's a risk. And it's the thing, right? Like, in the world of marketing, there's the old adage that you don't try and appeal to everybody because you'll end up appealing to nobody. They identified who their audience would be. They said we're really gonna lean into the 70s vibes that we have here. We're going to play with some stuff in a way that might turn some people off. And it worked because it turns out people just like things that feel like substantial, like they feel distinct and not like everything else that's coming out. So yeah, I can't think of a marketing campaign, even with Love to Megan and the great things, or Megan and then Smile. I think Smile did a really good job with their marketing too. But even those weren't sort of like, they were a cultural moment, but they weren't like an artsy kind of like vibe that people were going with. So yeah, everything just came together. Everything came together right for Longlegs. Great movie, standout performances, excellent marketing. Score is really good. I pre-ordered the score on vinyl from I can't remember the name of the website, but it was one of those, like, I came out of it and I was like, oh, is this going to be like a dissonant nightmare music for me to write to? Very much is. Very happy with it. I've gotten some good writing done already this week with it. So yeah, there is no conversation to be had at the end of this extra long episode of Uncertified. Normally we will say, is it a Donato movie or is it a Monagle movie? It's an everybody fucking movie, man. Everybody go see Longlegs and enjoy it.
Yeah, this is easily, hands down, if you were listening to the beginning of this podcast, my favorite Oz Perkins movie. I don't think it's yours. I think you're still Blackcoats.
It has to
Correct
be.
me.
It's perfect. It breaks my heart every time I watch it.
Understandable. No. So I mean, listen, I don't want me saying it's my favorite Oz Perkins movie to be belittled because of the beginning of this podcast, because I really do like this movie a whole great deal. I mean, it's a 4 out of 5. Like, I couldn't nudge it to that 4.5. I know people are giving it 5s across the board and really, really loving it, and God bless you. But yeah, it's a solid 4 out of 5 for me. So that's still damn good. It's still up there.
4 out of 5 for me. I think if I watch it again, I might get it up to a 4.5. But fives are just like, the Black Coat's Daughter is a 5. The Watcher is a 5. Those are movies that are just like in your soul forever kind of stuff. And this isn't that, but it's not that far off. Not really.
Yeah, Dude Bro Party Massacre 3 stuff. The real five
Yeah.
stars. The real 5 stars.
Yeah. No, I got you. That's those are movies too. I appreciate it. Well, Donato, you're a busy guy with a lot of articles and things coming out. So, how do folks stay connected to you on social media if they want to?
As always, at Donatobomb, DONATOBOMB, and that is Twitter, Letterboxd, Instagram as my most active. You also got TikTok and Blue Sky out there if you want to dangle a little carrot there too. And yeah, I got Fantasia coming up soon. So actually, I've got like 2 more assignments to finish off today, and then I am in Fantasia mode for the rest of the month, just cranking out screeners, trying to see what's there. We've got everything from from the director of Wolf Cop. There is a movie starring Chris Jericho that is a wrestling cult movie, so gonna check that out. We have the next movie from Steven Kaczynski, of Psycho Goreman fame. There's a lot of stuff I'm really excited for. There's an Estonian chainsaw horror musical that I don't fucking know. I'm gonna give it a shot too. Like, it's my vibe. So I like Fantasia for those really weird watches, and I really can't wait to get on top of this.
Am I correct in assuming that Fantasia is sort of the start to your festival season?
Yeah, I mean, South by's happened already.
Yeah, but
But
I
that's
feel like,
March.
yeah, South by has happened, but like Fantasia happens, and then you have some of the regional horror film. If you're a horror film fan, Fantasia feels like it's the kickoff of the horror film festival season.
Yeah, no, 100%. This is going to carry me into August. I'll take a little time in August because then after that it is super season
Yep.
where we're jumping right into Halloween Horror Nights. I got to do coverage for that. We're going to Fantastic Fest. We're going to Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond Fest in there at some point too. So yeah, busy time. Busy time for baby.
As for me, you can follow me on Blue Sky. It's monogle.beastsky.app or whatever the chart string is there. Just search for me, you'll find me. You can also follow the website and the podcast, Certified Forgotten, in a variety of different places. We're on Twitter, we're on Blue Sky, we're on Instagram, we're on the Slasher app because that's cool. We do that too. We're on Reddit. We have a subreddit that we built for the site just to make sure that people that look for our movies will find them there too. So if you like what you're seeing, go support us on a social channel. Pick a social channel and then follow us on there. Retweet our stuff, reskeet our stuff, share what you're seeing, give us a like. And if you really, really, really like what you're seeing, sign up for our Patreon. You can do it for free and get our weekly newsletter, or you can sign up for one of the many tiers that we have offered with some pretty cool benefits for our super fans as well. And of course, every dollar that you donate to Certified Forgotten goes directly into the pockets of our writers. Donato and I have never, may never profit off of this grand endeavor, but that doesn't really matter to us because you know the only thing that matters at the end of the day. Hail Satan. That's the only thing that matters at the end of the day.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan. We'll see you soon.